learners, I hope you went through the study material and you also listened to the previous lecture on Shaw's St. John. In today's lecture, I am going to move a bit further and talk about Joan of Arc and the character of Joan in this particular play by G.B. Shaw. So by now you know that Joan of Arc was a village girl, a peasant from Domremy. She was born in 1412 and she was burnt for heresy, witchcraft, sorcery in 1431. She was rehabilitated in the year 1456. So there are certain events, which you must be familiar with in order to gain a proper understanding about the drama and its character, the main character, the protagonist, Joan. She was designated as venerable in 1904 and she was declared blessed in 1908 and she was canonized in 1920. So these are the words of G.B. Shaw, and he says that she's one of the most notable warrior saint in the Christian calendar and the curious fish among the eccentric worthies of the Middle Ages. So this is how Shaw has described Joan of Arc, and he also observes two opinions about her, and he says that she was miraculous and she was also unbearable. So these two things, go parallel throughout the play. And you know that this play has been written in 6 scenes. It does not have acts. The play begins in 1429, which is 2 years before the execution of Joan. And it shows 16-year-old Joan as a young woman whom the soldiers are also drawn to. They stop swearing in her presence and they are quite swayed by the fierce passion that she epitomizes. And she is, all in all, she's epitomizing a lot of strength and courage. So Shaw describes her at the very first entry in the play as very confident, very appealing, and very hard to resist. And I have just added the initial dialogue that takes place between her and the captain, and she says, "Good morning, Captain Squire. Captain, you are to give me a horse and armor and some soldiers and send me to the Dauphin. Those are your orders from my lord." So you see that Joan has a lot of courage and confidence, and she approaches the captain, and she wants a horse, armor, and soldier, and she wants to go to Dauphin. And you know that he is the heir of France. He has to be. So she tells him that these are the orders from my lord. If you remember that she listens to these voices of the 3 saints, and by divine guidance, she is approaching the captain and she wants to be a soldier. Now, did you ever wonder when you were reading this particular play that she is a female and she is a woman, but Shaw has portrayed her in a very new role as a new woman. And that's what you need to know about Joan when you study this particular drama. So she has relentless faith, a few characteristics of her character or traits of her character, which are again taken from the real life. These are relentless faith, courage, and strength. She leads the French troops to victory against England, and she dresses as a man in a soldier's garb, and she speaks directly to God through the voices which only she can hear, and this makes her an object of jealousy and envy because people suspect about her whether it is really true or not, and if it is so, then how because of these voices, she might become very powerful, or she will be very near in the proximity of the would-be king, right? Dauphin. So she begins, when the story begins, as St. John begins, France is in disarray at the hands of English occupation, and it is quite poor. And poverty, that was very striking. And also, that was another thing that was very striking, was that morality was at an all-time low. So amidst this turmoil, this young girl who dresses as a man and hears the voices, Joan of Arc is like a glimmer of hope. She is illuminating the darkness, and she's dispelling the darkness that is engulfing the whole of France. And she's inspiring with her inner fire and plan a decisive victory for Orleans. So Joan, she takes the charge over the Dauphin's forces, and the Dauphin, as you know, is the son of King Charles VI, who was disowned by him, and henceforth, he is struggling for acquiring his kingdom and the throne. So through her valor, France is united, and Dauphin is finally able to ascend the throne which was denied to him. The English were under Henry V. Now they are driven away from France, and they are not happy with the triumph of Joan and the triumph of France. So both English Earl of Warwick and the chaplain insist that Joan is unnatural, and that she has used sorcery and witchcraft to gain this victory for France. So she now actually becomes a threat to two established institutions. Now, what is that? One is the supremacy of the church is challenged, and secondly, the political leadership is also challenged. Therefore, there is a fear that is rising in the masses. There is a fear that is rising, especially in those who are at the helm of affairs in politics as well as religion, that she probably is going to bring an end to their supremacy. So therefore, whether it is a chaplain or whether it is the Earl of Warwick, they try and label Joan of Arc as a witch, right? So, and we all know that Joan of Arc is tried for sorcery and witchcrafts. So, the bishop, Cockon, Warwick, and chaplain, they are all determined to make Joan fall down in her position. On the contrary, Joan is celebrated by the common people of France for her efforts, but she is criticized by the court, the chaplain, Cockon, and Earl of Warwick for her overtly ambitions and being very proud of herself. Her haughtiness is of concern. So because she, after having gained one victory, she insists on pushing towards achieving France's full unification and freedom by winning Paris. Now, do knows the captain, the king and the archbishop, they all advise her not to attempt liberating Paris. But despite all this, she goes ahead and but they refuse to assist her. And in the event that follows, she fails. So Joan's attempt to take Paris are foiled. The English capture her, and she stands as a prisoner of war. She is held by the English for the church and is to stand a trial for heresy. Now, what is this heresy? Something which is unprincipled and is not acceptable as per the religious ideals or dictates. So it is a heresy. So Warwick, Cockon, and the Inquisitor, I hope you're familiar with the characters by now, take special care to offer Joan a swift and a fair trial. Cocken seems to be bent on saving Joan's soul, endlessly encouraging her to renounce her deeds and voices she hears. So he wants a recantation, but she questions everything, and she realizes that the voices are right and she cannot renounce them. So that again shows how determined and strong willed Joan is. So, because of this, that she is not disowning those voices and she is being tried for heresy, she is sent away to be burnt at the stake, where again she is always insisting that she only serves the God and the church. Though her body perishes in the fire, Joan's pure heart is untouched and unconsumed by the blaze. Years later, the Dauphin, who eventually becomes the king, dreams of Joan's redemption, and she is finally rewarded and canonized as a saint. Though Joan fell in her pursuit of Paris and is captured by the English, she is sent for a trial for heresy. In the real life also, however, whatever was happening was a political mess, and the political mess was at the root of she being tried for a heresy, and if those were not the religious concerns. So to condemn Joan was to renounce the authority of King Charles and legitimize Henry VI's claim to the throne, right? So Dauphin was later known as the King Charles VII, right? So when Joan is found guilty of heresy, and which is a capital offense, she is burnt at the stake on 30th of May 1431 at the age of 19. So while the accounts of her death differ because of the supernatural events that take place, the executioner says that he greatly feared to be damned for this kind of execution. So try to understand the kind of influence that Joan was exerting on the common people. So shortly after her execution, she was again retried. While her sentence could not be undone, the previous trial was found corrupt and politically motivated, and Joan was found innocent. She was later canonized as saint of the Catholic Church. So I hope by now you are quite familiar with the timeline, the plot, and the character of Joan. What we need to probe in further is what kind of protagonist or what kind of a figure is Joan. So Pirandello writes in his work that Shaw's Saint Joan is a work of poetry from beginning to end. It might seem to be an impudent historical pamphlet masquerading as drama and also a flippant treatment of a sacred subject, but the whole drama is manifested with poetry because the stage and the stage directions exhibit that. So Shaw uses Joan as a symbol and a metaphor, and she is the symbol of his imagination. She otherwise also is a symbol of imagination because of her high genius and unusual power of visualization. So I would also like to bring to your attention what critics have said about Joan, because she has been referred to as a nationalist, a Protestant, and a champion of individual conscience. In her light, she was, even before Protestantism or nationalism was formally inaugurated, she was doing that and practicing it through her acts. And that is quite evident in the drama. So what Shaw was doing to the audience was that he was trying to give a glimpse, a picture of a modern woman, who's caught in a patriarchal society. A woman who is labeled as a witch. Why? Because she violated the rules of an oppressive sex gender system. So for sure, she stands as an early and divinely inspired heroine of the long crisis out of which a new culture is born. And these are the observations of the critic Cole. So this new culture comprised of new ideas, and these ideas were about the equality of women. And but what was happening, in the society was that such women were excommunicated, labeled as witches, were charged with sorcery, and we know the kind of trial and the subsequent canonization that took place. So she was singled out as a paragon of the new woman, who is contrasted to the womanly woman. If you remember one of his works, The Unwomanly Woman, where he gives the concept of a new woman who rises and shows herself as more capable, as much as capable as her male counterpart. So Joan is beyond comparison the most of unwomanly woman in the Shavian canon, and any casual observer can easily see that Joan fits this particular area and is like a portrait of a woman who is unmarried, plain, masculine, and she is revealing that through her dress and manner. I started my lecture by making a reference to one of the dialogues that take place between Joan and the captain. So we all know that Joan's status as an unwomanly persona, led to her burning and accounted for the 400 years between her death and then her full rehabilitation by the church. In the preface, Shaw observes, had Joan not been one of those unwomanly women, she might have been canonized much sooner. So you see how long the society, the culture takes to accept the changes which become quite evident and forceful. So at another place, the characters and especially the women represented and portrayed by Shaw are taken as a life force. And now this life force is not a gendered life force, it is an ungendered life force, neither a man nor a woman, but the strong willpower which is ungendered. So in other words, the behavior, whatever was expected to be in the times of Joan or in the times of Shaw, she shows certain kind of violations. So Shaw does not believe that his contemporaries are any more enlightened than Joan. In fact, the canonization shows that the civilization is improving, but rather it is emphasizing on how long it might take them to accommodate that kind of a slight change in the sex gender system that is taking place. So we are not very open to the changes that are coming up. Another critic observes, and his name is Watson, he examines Shaw's beliefs and as revealed in the treatment of Joan, he says, her accusers dwell on witchcraft and unfeminine behavior. Her defense against these charges shows how necessary it is for women to unsex themselves to succeed in great enterprises, how the woman's role is a trap to be wary of, and is furthermore the best example of the way all such traps as stereotypes work. Soldier is a role, bishop is a role, shepherd is a role, although shepherdess turns it into a mythological fancy, even saint is a role. But woman is an anti-role, and therefore a woman must rebel or she will be nothing then. So a woman in a patriarchal world has historically, been, if she is showing some extraordinary powers, she is defined as a harlot, a lunatic, or a witch. So that is why Watson, the critic, is using the word unsex in describing Shaw's strategy. So it is not about the inequality, but it is about the equality of sexes. Shaw believed that women should be like him, not in the masculine sense, but just because he happens to be a male, but they have to strive to be like him, the man Joan. The presentation of Joan in this particular play is an incarnation of everything that he admired about himself, whether it is strong will, inspiration, cleverness, determination, or innovation. So Shaw does not agree with most of the men of his time who tried to separate the word into two different spheres. The creation, Lacan observes, of a bourgeois public sphere, in other words, raised with a vengeance the question of which sexes ought legitimately to occupy it. I hope these observations will be helpful for you when you start writing your answers, right? So Shaw believed in intellect, and he said that it was the intellect which is the true measure of a person, and most of the people, he says, lack in this intellect. So his opinion on his fellow human beings were not held back any more than his own social beliefs. Shaw has said that no great writer uses his skill to conceal his meaning. He was a practical man of the theater. He was also an artist of integrity who never tailored his ideas to fit the audience, but deliberately and invariably presented what he thought and exposed the folly of what everybody else had accepted. So this shows that Shaw was of the belief that modern people must confront all the prejudices that they harbor, all sorts of multitudinous ideas, which are wrong and which need to be improved with the passing time. So Shaw has practically said so much about the new woman, and this is a quote from The Unwomanly Woman written by Shaw. He says, the sum of the matter is that unless woman repudiates her womanliness, her duty to her husband, to her children, to society, to the law, and to everyone but herself, she cannot emancipate. So he is giving a golden rule that if women have to emancipate, they need to repudiate those duties altogether, which are like a pressure and not letting them grow. It's not saying that it's abandoning of these duties, but it's like a balance, and also pursuing one's passion and following one's confidence. So for him, Joan is exhibiting her duty to the Lord, and as she is serving the Lord, she is also performing a duty to herself. Remember, in the very beginning of the play, Joan's father and brothers, they are reluctant to listen to what she has to say or what kind of life she wants to adopt. But ultimately, hearing these voices, the saints, so it's like hearing to your inner conscience, you liberate yourself. And Joan of Arc, by having done so, follows her heart's desire and shows herself as an emancipated and the new woman that G.B. Shaw tries to conceptualize through his dramatization, through the characterization of Joan of Arc. So Joan is a free spirit. She's like a part soldier, a vocation that was mostly left untouched by women of all times. She repeatedly refers herself to as a soldier, but not as a replica of men. She embraces her femininity behind her armor, which occasionally comes out. And for example, I have included this particular dialogue between Joan and Duno. I wish you were one of the village babies. And Duno says, why? Joan says, I could nurse you for a while. Duno says, you are a bit of a woman after all. Joan says, no, not a bit. I am a soldier and nothing else. Soldiers always nurse children when they get a chance. So that shows the feminine traits that are still within her, even when she is in the attire of a soldier's garb, and is carrying out the duties of a soldier's. Like many other heroines that have been presented by Shaw, Joan also lacks some qualities which are typical to a new woman. But she still possesses, many qualities which might make her give an equivalence to the male counterpart, not in appearance, but in the qualities. For example, commanding the army, being firm in her opinion, and successfully, influencing, being able to convince others and make them believe and follow the way which she wants. So she is sheer force and willpower. She is independent and intelligent, yet she is innocent and vulnerable, and that's why she is captured and she is tried for a heresy. So she is just like nature. She is capable of both the extremes of destruction and creation, but is vulnerable enough to be destroyed by the culture, which actually shows the inability of the cultures to adapt or to accept people with extraordinary powers or intellect. And now, Joan is not just one example. There are many who have suffered the same lot and misfortune because of their intellect. Socrates is one of them. Shaw's master skill at characterization, is coloring this historical figure of Joan, and is convincingly bringing out before us his concept of a contemporary new woman's hue, a new woman who is independent, who is intelligent, who is strong-willed, who has force and conviction to carry out all that one dreams, who can follow the voice of the conscience, who can lead successfully. I hope by now you have learned a few things about G.B. Shaw's Saint Joan, and how Saint Joan is epitomizing the new woman that modern drama tried to bring before the audience. Here are a few good articles which you can go through in order to understand this concept in a better manner. Thank you very much.